It seems only natural that you would want to create a selection in a single step whenever possible. But even with the very best selection techniques, you'll likely find that it is necessary to perform some cleanup of an initial selection. That involves adding to an existing selection, subtracting from that initial selection, or creating a selection that is the intersection of two selections. In this lesson, I'll show you how these operations work to enable you to fine-tune a selection. Here I'm just working with a sample image that's actually been faded back from an actual photographic image so that you can see the selection just a little bit better. In other words, I'm not going to create a real selection here, I just wanted you to have something more interesting to look at than a blank canvas. I'll choose the rectangular marquee tool in this case, not for any particular reason other than that it's a simple selection tool. I'll then click and drag to draw a basic selection. I can add to this selection by choosing the Add to Selection option. Note that by default, most of the selection tools will use a Create New Selection option as the default setting. That means if I click and drag to draw a new selection, it will replace my existing selection. But if I choose the Add to Selection option, then when I click and drag, I'm adding to the existing selection. This does not need to be a contiguous area that I'm adding. I could certainly add a selection to an existing selection, just simply increasing the size of the selection with a contiguous selection as the result. But it does not need to be contiguous. I can create a variety of selection areas throughout the image, all of them discontiguous from each other. I can also subtract from an existing selection. If I choose the Subtract from Selection option, when I draw a selection, I'm actually identifying an area where I want all pixels to be deselected. For example, here I've drawn a selection around an existing selection area. All areas inside this selection that I'm drawing will be removed from the existing selection. In that case, this simply means the rectangle that's inside of the rectangle I'm currently drawing. When I release the mouse, you can see that that area of the selection disappears. I can also cut away from existing selections, subtracting from any portion of an existing selection, including areas inside of the existing selection. Finally, I have the Intersect with Selection option. This is often a source of confusion for photographers working with selections. Instead of worrying about what intersect means, think of this option as saying, I want you to remove all areas from the selection except for the area that I'm identifying. What's really happening is I'm defining a new selection overlapping with an existing area of a selection. I'm basically saying this is the only area I want included in the selection. But again, because that can be a little bit confusing, think of this as meaning subtract everything from the selection except the area that I've identified. That means that when I release the mouse here, only the small rectangle inside the rectangle I'm currently drawing will be included in that final selection. In addition to using the buttons on the options bar that are available for most of the selection tools, we can also use keyboard shortcuts. I'll go ahead and choose the New Selection option and then draw a new selection to get started. Instead of clicking on the Add to Selection button, I can hold the Shift key on the keyboard while I click and drag to draw a selection. That area will then be added to my existing selection. When I want to subtract from selection, I can simply hold the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on Macintosh and then click and drag, in this case, to define the area that I want to subtract. And to get the Intersect option, I can hold both the Shift and Alt keys on Windows or the Shift and Option keys on Macintosh. And that will allow me to define an area that I want to be the only area selected based on the overlap between the existing selection and the new area that I'm drawing. The Add, Subtract, and Intersect options are available for most of the selection tools in Photoshop. This ability is key to being able to fine-tune any selection to perfection.